Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss what the government seem to be likely to do to deal with the second COVID wave, how there are conflicting pieces of advice from scientists, but how that is not an excuse for basically doing nothing. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So first of all, bit of news yesterday. I couldn't believe this. This was out there. You probably may not have seen this unless you're paying attention. So obviously testing is the real thing at the moment. It's very, very difficult to get tests. We know this. A colleague of mine at the college where I do a bit of part-time teaching needs a test at the moment. Key workers supposed to be prioritised. Not teachers aren't prioritised as high as frontline healthcare workers or anything like that, but it's still supposed to be a priority. Can't get a test, which means that can't get in to do the physical teaching. So it's a massive issue, and the government are supposed to be improving on this. And I saw a letter from the health secretary to an MP for Stockport, because they were contacted and said, look, we haven't got the capacity here. And the health secretary wrote back saying, don't worry, we've got you covered. We're going to be building a new testing centre in your constituency. To which the MP thought, oh, this is marvellous. So you're going to be building a test centre in Stockport. Fantastic. Oh, no, not quite in Stockport. Oh, just outside? Yeah, we're going to build it in Cambridge. Okay. Cambridge is 240 miles away. Yeah. Is that all right? He don't give a crap anymore, does he? Matt Hancock does not give a crap anymore. I think he's one of those, cabinet ministers who's not as stupid as many of the others. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing is wrong. He knows he's trashed his reputation. And he's just going with it now. I was talking to someone else about it on social media somewhere. And we had to use the old Macbeth quote, about being stepped in blood so far that it's just as tedious to go back as it would to go forward. And it's the same for him. He knows there's no pulling out of this. Maybe he regrets it. Maybe he thinks at the start of this, when the alarm bells were ringing in his head, do you know what? I should have just done what Sajid Javid did and go and not get myself involved in this shit show. But he didn't. He went with it, and now he's just thinking, do you know what? There is no good way to pull out of this. I'm just going to go for it. And he just doesn't care. Just does whatever Dominic Cummings tells him to now. But in terms of what the government are going to do about the COVID crisis, so we know that the chief medical officer has been arguing for a 2-week national lockdown again. He was advising that last week. So if it is the right thing to do, again, we're delaying it. Remember, the reason why we got into so much trouble, not just in terms of the healthcare crisis, but also economically. All these people who say, oh, no, we can't, like Rishi Sunak, we can't risk the economy by, going into lockdown. Bear in mind, the reason why we've damaged our economy far more than other countries is not because we went into lockdown, because they did as well. It's because we went into lockdown too late. If you need to do it, you do it when you need to do it. Now, that's obviously not going to happen, even if he announces it later today, which he's not going to. Politically, he can't. Here's the thing. Even if Boris Johnson was actually trying to be a good Prime Minister now, he's not. But if he were, his own backbench MPs won't allow it. The Tory media will be all over it as well. So it's not going to happen. There's zero chance of that. But he is going to make a speech about something today. You would think restrictions are coming in. And then I wake up this morning to find out, and this has been muted for a bit ago. So it was like, okay, the chief medical officer wants to have another lockdown, temporary lockdown, just to let testing capacity catch up. Now, the problem with that is, of course, the government say the testing capacity is marvellous. They overinflate it massively. They're telling us we're testing hundreds of thousands when we are not at all. So if you were to do it for that reason, again, people would say to the government, but you say you're testing loads of people. What's going on here? But you've got on the one hand him calling for a national lockdown. On the other hand, Tory backbench MPs saying, well, couldn't we just close pubs and restaurants at 10 p.m? Guess which one they're going for? Yeah, according to media reports anyway, it's the shutting at 10 p.m. because, the coronavirus is nocturnal. Everyone knows that, don't they? So if you shut them at 10 p.m, that'll sort the problem out. And the issue is now, to be fair, and there will be people looking at this going, okay, there's reports. You've got the government's chief advisors who are advising the national lockdown for 2 weeks. But then you've got another group of scientists, experts, who are not calling for that and say, well, that's contradictory, so what can the government do? They could look at the areas of common agreement is what they could do. Because the other group are not arguing for nothing. What they are saying is if you apply a national lockdown, if it's a one-size-fits-all policy, your problem with that is you're hitting some areas harder than others, hitting some people harder than others. And remember, in the first lockdown, because there were doctors and nurses seconded to deal with COVID, there were lots of people who were doing without treatments for other things, and then they suffered. So indirectly been suffering from COVID, but not in a way that counted on those figures. And that's, and I get that. I totally understand that. But there's a couple of things I would say from that group of scientists' point of view, without doubting, of course, their expertise on the subject matter, which I do not share. The first thing is, what they are talking about is a targeted approach. The government are not capable of a targeted approach. They are simply, and it's not just that their politics isn't allowing them to do it well. They're not capable. They are incompetent. So what they're asking for is not politically possible. I totally accept that it may be scientifically the best advice, but it is not politically possible. The second thing is, if we end up with another situation where you've got doctors and nurses who'd normally be treating other things, being seconded to deal with all the crap that's going to blow up if we do not control this second wave, then all of those people, lockdown or not, all of those people who need treatments for other things are still not going to get those treatments as, triage becomes very different. So again, I would want to ask them, so what are you thinking about that side of it? Now, so I think potentially the government's advisors are advising the national lockdown, not because it's necessarily the best thing objectively to do, because it's the only thing they know the government are capable of doing. But of course, even then, politically, they're not. Now, I will sort of say the Independent Sage Group, which some may know about, it's an independent group of scientists who try and explain to the public the situation and offer their advice, because the actual Sage Group, the government's scientific advisors, are all really kept under wraps. They've started more recently going public with a few things because the government keep, trying to blame them for bad advice when their advice was not what the government said it was. So Independent Sage at the weekend, or just at the end of last week, came up with 10 pieces of advice that the government could put in place. And, and for each of these things that they did, they would help stem the tide, blunt the second wave. So let's see how many of them the government may or will do. So the first one, they said, close pubs and restaurants indoors. Well, from these reports today, that's not going to happen. We'll wait to see what Boris Johnson says later today, but that's not going to, and I didn't believe that would happen anyway. So straight away, that is one massive source of infections the government are going to do nothing about. 2, work at home if possible. Now, here's the thing. There's lots of companies who've got enough intelligence to if their employees can work at home, then they'll let them do that anyway. To be honest, they can't get everyone back in the office anyway because of distancing. So they need some people to work at home. But there are also employers with dumb managers who are forcing people to come in when they don't need to. Their work hasn't suffered and they're fine, their mental health's fine, and they're working perfectly safely at home. That would need to be knocked on the head. Will the government do that? No, they will not. And then it says, if impossible, don't return to the workplace until certified COVID safe. Again, the government are not really bothered about that. 3, limit indoor social interaction to a bubble of 3 households. In theory, the government could go for something like that. I'll wait and see on that one. I'm not going to immediately rule out Boris Johnson, going along with that. 4, fund schools. That's not happening. But just so you know what they want you to fund schools for. Fund schools to allow smaller, socially distanced classes and provide digital resources for all students. Yeah, that ain't happening. Not happening. Because, apart from the fact they're already massively spending on their party donors and their mates. They haven't got enough for actual public services. I'm not even sure how that would work anyway, because even if you gave schools the money for more staff to have more social, you'd need the physical spaces, and you also need how do you get the staff quickly? I mean, you can't suddenly conjure up a load of new teachers. You'd be talking about teaching assistants. You still need training. I'm not sure. Digital resources, again, it might be possible a little bit, but the funding's not coming anyway, so that's irrelevant. 5, create an emergency fund to support all of those needing to shield or self-isolate. Again, classic problem. If someone needs to shield or self-isolate, but they need to work, they cannot manage on statutory sick pay, so they just don't shield or they don't self-isolate. Provide them the money to be able to do that. Don't force them to have to choose financial ruin in order to do the right thing. Again, the government won't announce that. They should. And under enough political pressure, I think they would do something about that, but that pressure isn't there. That pressure has to come from their own backbenchers, by the way. Opposition parties, even clubbing together, cannot do anything about that. They are already arguing for this. It has to come from Tory backbenchers. So that means it needs to come from members of the public writing into their Conservative MPs and saying, this is outrageous. But that's not happening in enough numbers. 6, rebuild the testing system based on trusted local NHS and public health structures. In other words, stop giving money to these private companies who know nothing about healthcare. Like, this is the thing. In theory, a private company could have delivered test and trace. I would still argue it would not be as efficient, but they could have done it in theory. But they gave the contracts to people who know nothing about it, nothing at all, and put directors in charge who know nothing at all. What they're saying is, give it to people who know what they're doing. It should have been given to the NHS in the first place, and just abandon it. The government abandon everything at the moment anyway. Just abandon this, give it to the NHS. Again, won't do that because that goes against their politics of privatising the NHS. 7, recruit local contact tracers who know their patch. Instead of being, getting people involved who are trying to do all these things remotely. A lot of work can be done remotely, but when you need local knowledge, you need local people. Again, that won't happen. 8, provide clear, consistent and culturally appropriate messaging about testing and other protective measures. Yeah, that's not happening. The messaging has been, if you're going to have a list of terrible things that the government have done, the messaging has been the worst of all. Absolutely dreadful. And the idea of bringing out culturally appropriate messaging to target different communities is not happening with this government. 9, establish a clear strategy. Oh dear God. Establish a clear strategy and set for priorities for symptomatic and asymptomatic testing. Testing, again, this would have to be based on you rebuilding your testing system. We're not even easing pressure on the situation to allow the crap testing system to recover. I shudder to think what we're going to be saying in 2 weeks' time. Whatever it is, I do not think it's going to be, whoa, we got away with that. And 10, provide wraparound support which enables people to self-isolate. So they've already talked about making it financially possible, but the other support mechanisms in place as well, like being able to get the groceries and medicines and stuff like that. Again, no, they'll leave that to local communities to sort out. Because, Conservatives love charity. Love it. Because it saves them doing a job. But there we are. That's sort of what the advice is. The government have got, multiple pieces of advice. They're not going to take any of it. They're not even going to take the common areas of advice. By the sounds of it, I will wait for his speech later, but that's what it sounds like to me. So we are going to be in a spectacular mess. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.